In this video, we're stepping back in time, images that were captured by some of the earliest photographers in the state's history. Most of the photos you'll see are in public domain from Florida Memory State Library and Archives, preserved photos that allow us to see Florida as it was. This image, taken in 1849, is one of the earliest surviving photographs taken in Florida. It shows Key West. At the time, it was one of the richest cities in Florida. In fact, during the mid-1800s, Key West was the largest and wealthiest city in the state. This was because of wrecking. The Florida Keys sit along one of the most dangerous shipping lanes in the world. Coral reefs and shallow waters tore apart ships regularly. Salvage crews, known as wreckers, would race out to stranded vessels to recover cargo. By the 1850s, Key West was a bustling port filled with sailors, merchants, cigar makers, and captains. The island also became home to the major military installation, Fort Zachary Taylor. Construction began in 1845 to defend the southeast coast. This fort would soon play a major role in the American Civil War. The population in 1860 was just over 140,000 people. Plantations existed primarily in North Florida, especially around the capital, Tallahassee. Here, cotton was king, tying Florida to the rest of the Deep South. Much of Central and South Florida remained sparsely populated. Cattle ranching thrived in Florida's interior, and would later feed the Confederate troops during the Civil War. By 1861, tensions between North and South reached a breaking point. On January 10, 1861, Florida seceded from the Union. It became the third state to join the Confederacy. Florida did not see many large battles as Virginia, Georgia, or Tennessee, but it played a crucial role as the breadbasket of the Confederacy. One of the most important battles fought in Florida was the Battle of Augustine in 1864 near Lake City. It was the largest Civil War battle fought in the state. When Florida seceded from the Union in 1861, most federal installations in the state were quickly seized by Confederate forces. However, Fort Pickens remained in Union hands. Federal troops commanded by Lieutenant Adam J. Sleemer reinforced the fort and refused to surrender it. This made Fort Pickens one of the few southern forts to stay under Union control at the outbreak of war. Across Pensacola Bay, Confederate troops occupied the Pensacola Navy Yard and nearby forts, including Fort Broncos and Fort McRee. Both sides built up their defenses. In November 1861, fighting erupted when Union forces fired on Confederate positions with heavy artillery fire, bombarding Confederate batteries and nearly destroying Fort McRee. The Confederates evacuated Pensacola in May 1862 after Union victories across the Gulf. Fort Pickens remained in Union hands for the rest of the war, one of only 4 southern forts to do so. When the war ended in 1865, Florida was devastated economically. Railroads, which Florida had only 402 miles before the war, became the focus of development after the war. In the 1870s and 1880s, railroads became the key to Florida's future. Before railroads, traveling into the Florida interior meant days, sometimes weeks, by stagecoach or riverboat. Railroads began pushing farther south, and then came the investors. Most important of these was Henry Flagler. Flagler, the wealthy co-founder of Standard Oil, first visited St. Augustine after his wife developed tuberculosis in the 1880s. He loved Florida, but there was a problem. It was difficult to travel across the state. He decided to change that. In the 1870s and 80s, wealthy Northerners began arriving in Florida during the winter months. Doctors at the time believed Florida's mild climate could cure respiratory illnesses like tuberculosis. Small coastal towns began advertising themselves as health resorts. In 1885, Henry Flagler constructed Hotel Ponce de Leon for America's elite. He purchased short-line tracks and extended the railroad down Florida's east coast. Railroads and steamboats made it possible for thousands of visitors to escape northern winters, stay in hotels across Florida, see the springs, and enjoy the warm weather. On April 25, 1898, the United States declared war on Spain. The conflict, known as the Spanish-American War, centered on Cuba, just 90 miles south of Florida. Because of its location, Florida became the primary staging ground for American troops heading to the Caribbean. The city of Tampa was transformed almost overnight. Tens of thousands of soldiers poured into the area. Rail yards overflowed with supplies. Harbors filled with ships. Photographs from Tampa in 1898 show rows of tents stretched across open fields. Makeshift military camps under the hot Florida sun. Among the soldiers training in Florida was a volunteer cavalry unit known as the Rough Riders, led by Theodore Roosevelt. Florida would help America become a global power. When the war ended later that year, the United States gained territories overseas, and Florida's importance as a gateway to the Caribbean grew. As the 20th century began, Florida entered a period of steady growth. Railroads continued expanding south, the population boomed, and citrus became one of the state's most valuable industries. Photographs from the early 1900s show busy streets in cities like Jacksonville, Orlando, and Pensacola. Wooden structures were replaced by brick. Cars soon replaced horse-drawn carriages, and electricity stretched further into the interior. In the 1920s, Florida experienced one of the craziest real estate booms in American history. Investors from across the country rushed to buy land. Swamps were drained and filled in, canals were dug, and cities like Miami expanded in size. Developers advertised Florida as a paradise. In 1926, a devastating hurricane struck South Florida, causing $100 million in damage, an estimated $1.83 billion today. And then, just a few years later, the entire nation would collapse into chaos. When the stock market crashed in 1929, Florida was already weakened from the 1926 land bust. The Great Depression hit Florida hard. Banks failed, construction halted, and tourism slowed. Photographs from the 1930s show abandoned developments, families living in vehicles or makeshift camps, and migrant workers across the state. But federal New Deal programs brought projects to Florida. Roads and bridges were built. Infrastructure built during the Depression would help Florida's future growth. By the late 1930s, Florida was still recovering. The land boom had collapsed. The Great Depression had scarred its cities and towns. But in 1941, everything changed. On December 8, 1941, the United States entered World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Because of its warm climate and vast amount of undeveloped land, Florida was ideal for year-round military training. Military installations appeared across the state. Training camps sprang up almost everywhere, in cities like Stark, Carabel, and Leesburg. Military uniforms became a common sight. Pensacola, already home to Naval Air Station Pensacola, expanded and was transformed into the largest naval aviation training center in the world. By the middle of the war, Florida had more training bases than almost any other state. Florida's waters also became a battlefield. German U-boats operated in the Gulf and along Florida's Atlantic coast during the early years of the war. Oil tankers were sunk within sight of shore. Residents in coastal cities sometimes reported seeing flames on the horizon. For a time, parts of Florida enforced coastal blackouts to make ships harder to be targeted by German U-boats. The war that felt far away for so many Americans was visible from Florida's coast. Luxury hotels were converted into military housing and training facilities. Beachfront properties were used for drills. Even quiet resort towns were flooded with soldiers. When the war ended in 1945, hundreds of thousands of servicemen had trained in Florida. Many had never seen the state before, but they remembered the warm waters, beaches, and beautiful architecture. Old photographs do something powerful. They are a moment frozen in time. They show us Florida before the modern skyscrapers, retirement communities, before the interstates and theme parks. They show small cattle towns, dirt streets, glass-bottomed boats, and a time when old Florida thrived. They remind us that Florida did not always look the way it does today. We can still see it, not as paintings or stories, but as it truly was. I want to thank y'all for watching, folks. I hope you enjoyed, and we will see you on the next. Peace.